I was at work trying to stay out of sight when one of my coworkers cornered me and asked me if I could take a look at their Mantis tiller. Now, I've worked on several of these and I think they're great machines. However, I don't know if they're worth the insanely high price they're asking for these. Now, hopefully I can get it working again, but after looking at its condition, I'm going to need all the help that I can get, and the best part is I've got a new tool to help out. In today's video, we're looking at this really cool Mantis tiller, or more accurately a cultivator, and the problem is that it's been unused for quite a long time and now it won't start. Unfortunately, that's what happens when you have a seasonal machine, and sometimes you just leave them unused during the off season, and that's when bad things can happen to them, which is what you're about to see with this one. Now, I'm going to try and repair this tiller, but yours might be different, so this might not work on yours. So if things are not working out for you, like in the video, please ask about it. I'll be glad to answer your questions. Now, the first thing that I like to do is to have a good look at the machine and try to figure out what kind of condition it's in. Now, most of the time, you're going to find out that these are in really good condition, and to be honest, the reason why is because after the first use, many people don't know how to put them away for storage. Of course, it's not the machine's fault because after-use care is just as important as putting oil and gasoline into a small engine. The second item I like to check is that the engine still has good compression. Now, this can be quickly done by simply pulling on the rope and feeling how much the engine is fighting back. And luckily, the engine is fighting back quite a lot, meaning this engine is not worn out, which is great news. Now, while trying to use the trigger, it would seem that it's a bit sticky. Now, it could be the cable that's the problem or the carb. Now, there is some fuel in the tank, so the next step is to purge the air out of the lines, choke the carb, and try starting it. However, I can already tell you how this is going to go. So as expected, it didn't start, and the biggest giveaway that it wouldn't is because the purge bulb was not filling with fuel. Now, before we go on, we still need to hear this engine start and run, otherwise we'll need to do more diagnostic work. Luckily, it started and ran for a few seconds on the fuel that we put into the carb, which is fantastic news. While we have access to the throttle lever on the carb, it's pretty easy to figure out that our sticky trigger is because the carb is stuck. And hopefully when we try and service the carb, it'll free up. Of course, since this machine did come with fuel in it, I want to pour it out and examine it. I want to see if there's any water in it and see how old it is, and also what kind of mixture they're using. And what I find is not good. By the smell, it's not fresh, but it's not old either. There's also no water in it, but what I don't like about it is how much oil there is in it. You should be able to see through it from the side, which you can't, which means there's way too much oil in it. The reason this is important is because too much oil in the mixture could interfere with how the engine starts and runs. It could also lead to excessive carbon in the combustion chamber, which could collect on the spark arrestor screen, blocking off the exhaust. Now, the engine did start and run during our test, but what if it didn't start? The first item I would check is if there's spark from the ignition system. You can either use a spark checker or you can remove the plug and reconnect the wire to it. Then while the plug is touching a metal part of the engine, pull on the rope. You should be able to see sparks at the tip of the plug, and if you don't, you might have an ignition coil issue or the on-off switch might be the problem. But what happens if you check for spark and there is spark at the plug? Then what? The next step would be to check for enough working compression from the engine. You'll obviously need a compression tester, and after installing it into the spark plug opening, you'll need to pull on the rope several times and see what kind of reading you can get. You want to see a reading in the range of 150 psi or better, but as long as it's over 100 psi, I'd gladly take it. Anything below 100 shows signs of serious wear, and you don't want to be anywhere below 60 psi either, because that's very close to the borderline of the engine having enough compression to even start and run. Even though our engine started and ran, I could still get a compression reading on it if I wanted to know just how worn out it might be, but I don't think I need to at the moment. I did try and clean the filter just to see if I could save it, and I think it came out pretty good. I'll just let it dry in the sun, and then we'll see how it works later on. And since we found out there was too much oil in the fuel, we need to get to the spark arrestor screen to see if it's clogged with carbon. The screen sits on the outlet of the muffler, and to get to it, we need to take off some of the plastics. I think you can do this without taking off the recoil, but I do want to clean off any dirt that might be getting in the way of keeping the engine cool while running. Now, the screen is supposed to keep sparks from coming out of the muffler, which should help to keep from starting a grass fire. I'm going to say this, do not throw away the screen. I would take it out to inspect it. If it's dirty, clean it and then reinstall it. If you find that yours is missing, I would replace it with a new one. You do not want to be responsible for a fire that burns down other people's homes or your own. Of course, the choice is yours to make, so please make the one that best suits you. So once you get to the screen and you find out that it is clogged, how do you go about cleaning it then? Well, for me, I like to use a torch to burn off the carbon, but there are other ways to clean it, and it's up to you to choose the way that you're comfortable with. And it looks as though this one is surprisingly clean of any carbon, which doesn't make any sense, but it does save us from having to do any cleaning. And of course, I'm taking my own advice and I'm putting it back into the muffler and replacing the gasket and the deflector. And while looking at the engine, I was finally able to spot the sticker that had the make and model for the machine. Now when trying to find parts for it, you'll need this information to help find the exact parts you need. Otherwise, if you just search for Mantis tiller parts, you might get something that you weren't expecting. Now I was trying to get the fuel filter out of the tank to check on its condition when I realized the fuel line had become hard and I ended up breaking it. Now the exposed fuel lines looked pretty good, so I was on the fence about changing them, but I guess this made up my mind. I'll start by disconnecting the fuel lines from the carb, then I'll take the carb off the engine, which we need to do anyway, then I can finally use my new tool. So I've gotten tons of comments saying that I need to get an ultrasonic cleaner, so I finally broke down and got one. But my biggest gripe about getting one of these is that you need to clean off any dirt or grime from the body of the carb, otherwise you risk contaminating the rest of the carb. I just find it ironic that you have to clean the carb before the machine cleans it. Now for the sake of time, I'm going to put hot water into it, just enough to cover the edge of the basket. While the heater is working to get the water even hotter, I'll then go about the unneeded task of cleaning any extra dirt from the carb. After cleaning it, I'll then take it apart and inspect its overall condition and find out just how bad it is, and man, did I get a few surprises from this one. So when pressing on the bulb with no lines attached to it, you should be able to hear a whistling sound, but as you can tell, that's not happening here. In fact, the bulb is really tough to press on, meaning there's a severe blockage in the carb, which hopefully the ultrasonic will take care of. After removing the bulb, we're now able to get to the metering diaphragm, and its job is to control fuel flow through the carb. It does this by pressing on the needle and rocker arm underneath it, however this one is a bit stiff, meaning it's not going to be able to do that. If I had to rate this diaphragm, I'd say it was in really bad shape and it needs to be replaced. In fact, it's bad enough that I'm not even going to bother trying to save it. Next, I'll take off the cover for the pumping diaphragm, and what I'm trying to see is whether or not the inlet screen is clogged with debris. Luckily it's not clogged, which is great news, but if yours is, you'll need to use some carb cleaner to help clean it. Next, I'm going to take off the needle and rocker arm, that way the ultrasonic can clean that area. So I will say this, I'm not taking out the mixture screws on purpose because I want to see if the machine will clean that area so that I don't have to do it. But why not take them out so that you can get them cleaned? Simple, I want to see if I have to take them out to get cleaned or if I can get away without having to do it. I want to see what this machine can do and can't do. That way I can find out if I just wasted a bunch of money only to save a few minutes with a can of carb cleaner. So here's my take on what an ultrasonic cleaner is supposed to do. I should be able to take a dirty carb mostly apart and have the machine clean every single passage that the cleaning solution is touching. Now I shouldn't have to pre-clean the outside of the carb, and I shouldn't have to take it completely apart because it's submerged in a cleaning solution. Now maybe I'm wrong and I still have to go through the entire song and dance only to not have to use carb cleaner, which of course costs money. So is that the only reason why I should get an ultrasonic cleaner then, just so I can save on carb cleaner? Just put it into a bag, turn it on, and walk away. There's just a few problems with that plan though. Now depending upon how much I use this machine and how I treat it, it may not last long enough to make it worth the price. Now for the price of this machine, I could have bought 43 cans of carb cleaner and I could easily clean several small carbs with each can. So if my math skills are still sharp, I would have to use this machine on at least 250 carbs to break even. I'm not going to say anything bad about the origins of this machine, but just guessing, I highly doubt it's going to last that long. I will say one thing about this machine, it is really cool to watch in action, and for me, any bit of entertainment is good entertainment. While it's still cooking, I'm going to spend this time replacing the fuel tank grommet and the fuel lines. But why did I have to change them? Unfortunately, depending upon what kind of fuel you use, it can damage the fuel lines and the grommet. I'm not going to say why because there are very strong opinions about the reasoning behind it, so I'm just going to keep it broad. So take my advice and if possible use ethanol-free gasoline with a decent 2-stroke oil. But if you can't and you have to use ethanol fuel, then I'm going to try to keep the contact with that fuel to a minimum if possible. As to how you want to do that, I'll leave that up to you and your imagination. Now the grommet that came off the tank wasn't in terrible shape, but it was a bit on the hard side, and this might cause it to leak when the tank is full. So the machine has finished its first round of cleaning, and it's pretty amazing to see the brown stuff floating on top of the cleaner. I can only guess that it's the stuff the cleaner and the ultrasonic was able to remove, which is pretty cool if it is. Now that's what happened only after 10 minutes, so I wonder what would happen if I ran it for an additional 10 minutes. Hopefully the carb comes out working just like it should, but I'm going to spoil it for you. What comes out of it was a bit perplexing. Now while it's doing another round of cleaning, I'll start to put the rest of the tiller back together, and by the time it's done cooking, I should be ready for it. Now I do like the convenience of the ultrasonic cleaner. Just load up your dirty dishes, turn it on and walk away, and work on some other part of the machine. Now the machine just stopped, and I'm really anxious to see how this turns out. Just be careful because these parts are still really hot. After getting the bag out of the machine, I'll then pour the cleaner into a bottle so that I can filter it later on and use it again. The parts did change color, which shouldn't hurt it, but I do want to switch to a different cleaner the next time to see if I get a different result. Now the only part that I'm worried about the most is the plastic section where the purge bulb goes, because I think that's where a blockage is at. Once I get that tiny spring out of the body of the carb, I'll then check to make sure that it's clear by using a small wire and some carb cleaner, but there's a huge problem. Even after using the wire and some carb cleaner, I wasn't able to clear the blockage. Now the worst part was that I thought the ultrasonic would have taken care of it, but it hasn't. Instead, I had to use a piece of wire, carb cleaner, and a lot of high pressure compressed air to free up the check valve that's in the plastic part. So what was the point of getting and using an ultrasonic cleaner again? Now if you say it's so that I use my time wisely while the machine does its cleaning, I might have to argue about that one. No, I can't really blame the machine though, and that's because I'm still trying to figure out which cleaner works best. And secondly, this carb was the worst one I've seen in a long time, so even if I had to clean this one by hand, I doubt I would have been successful at it. Let's get this straight. These ultrasonic cleaners will only increase your chances to clean a carb, however, they're not miracle workers, at least as far as I can tell. So here's a great example. This throttle lever is working better than before the cleaning, however, it's not even close to how it's supposed to work. But after a few shots of carb cleaner on the shaft it pivots on, it's now working like it should. Now you would think that after 20 minutes in hot cleaner and using the ultrasonic that the shaft would have been cleaned and I wouldn't have to follow up with some carb cleaner, but you'd be wrong. So what all did I have to do to the carb that I don't think I should have had to do after using the ultrasonic cleaner? First was a pre-cleaning, second was a follow-up with compressed air, and lastly still having to use carb cleaner to help finish off what the ultrasonic couldn't. So yes, I'm still questioning why I even bothered buying this thing, and if I can't find a better cleaner, I might have to change my opinion about these. Unfortunately, I am running out of time to finish this repair, so this is where I have to leave it until I find more time. But I will tell you one thing, this won't be the last time we use the ultrasonic for this project, so hopefully it redeems itself because right now my opinion about it is very low. So my question is, do you have an ultrasonic cleaner, and if you do you have any tips for me to help get better results? It could be which cleaner to use, or maybe what kind of container works best, and any advice would be greatly appreciated. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions about this project or about your own projects, and I hope to see you in the next video.